Good evening, everybody, and welcome. We're delighted to be hosting Professor BN Goswamy to do a talk for us here at MAP in collaboration with BIC. I always consider Professor Goswamy to be the heartthrob of the miniature world. Every time he talks or gives a talk, you fall in love with miniatures all over again. But we thought this time that instead of MAP introducing him, it would be great to have someone from a completely different field, but extraordinarily talented as well. And so I'd like to invite a great friend of MAP and a supremely gifted artist, Malvika Sarukai, to do the honors for us. Malvika.
Namaskar. Good evening. Welcome to the Bangalore International Center, and thank you for joining us for yet another enriching Map Talks event through icy peaks and mauve rivers by none other than the preeminent art historian, Dr. BN Goswamy. Thank you, Abhishek and the MAP team, for giving me the privilege and honor to introduce this event. This talk becomes special as it is based on the latest book, A Sacred Journey, co-authored by Dr. BNG and the late Dr. Karuna Goswamy, on the Kedara Kalpa series of paintings, including research and identification for the first time of the ancient Shaivite texts from Rajasthan, on which these paintings are based. In this talk, Professor Goswamy will interpret a series of hitherto unidentified Pahari paintings from the Kedara Kalpa, depicting the journey of 5 pilgrims through uncharted territory to have a darshan of Shiva in Kailash. What makes this book exceptional is the shared journey of 2 more pilgrims, Dr. BNG and the late Dr. Karuna Goswamy. A few words on the illustrious Professor BN Goswamy, who is Professor Emeritus of Art History at the Punjab University, Chandigarh. His spectrum of work on Indian paintings has gained him the eminence of being India's leading art historian, and his explorations have been inspirational for everyone at MAP and for students of art history. His many accolades include the Jawaharlal Nehru Fellowship, the Rietveld Award for Outstanding Research in Art History, the Padma Shri in 1998, and the Padma Bhushan in 2008. In addition, Professor Goswamy has been a visiting professor at several universities across the world. He is an integral part of MAP's journey as a guru, friend, guide, mentor, and part of the museum's International Advisory Panel. Copies of the book, A Sacred Journey, are available for purchase just outside the auditorium. I also thank Esther and Emma from Signable for interpreting for us this evening. Before we begin, may I request that all mobile phones are put on silent mode. Thank you. I now invite Professor BN Goswamy to lead us on a journey of discovery. Thank you.
If I had my way, I would not be speaking. I would rather have had Malvika stand here, not talk about me or my work, but just stand. I'm here to redeem a promise I made a couple of years ago. And that was to lecture on the same theme that I'm going to do now. Things intervened, COVID came in, hasn't quite gone away, but has in a certain sense relented a bit. So here I am, and I'm very grateful that I get this opportunity again. It is friends like Abhishek, Radhika, friends like Vinita Bali, Balan Nambiyar, who are additional attractions for me to be coming here. Bangalore has been very kind to me always, and I'm very, very appreciative of the fact that I'm tolerated with a measure of, shall I say, tolerance, indulgence, and respect. What I'm going to speak on is a series of paintings, but I lead you to it through tortuous bylanes. One of the things we have to remember that when we look at these paintings of the past, we are entering a different world. The great poet Mir Taqi Mir of the 18th century had a wonderful utterance. He said, "Le saans bhi ahista ke nazuk hai bahut kaam, afaaq ki is kaargahe shisha gari ka." Breathe gently here and soft, because the world which has been put together by the heavens on high and so on is fragile, brittle. You cannot walk with your boots on into this particular territory. Le saans bhi ahista. At the same time, another great poet, and I'm not going to lecture in poetry, but I'm reminded of this great utterance by Ghalib. कौन जाने कि ये जलवा गरी किसकी है? कौन जाने कि ये जलवा गरी किसकी है? पर्दा डाला है कुछ ऐसा कि उठाए न बने. Things are behind a veil. And however much we make an effort, however is the effort that we put in, it just doesn't reveal itself in its entirety. Some things stay hidden, some things stay elusive, some things are constantly escaping from our grasp. We thought we knew it, and yet it is gone the very next moment. It is like holding a drop of mercury on the palm of your hand and asking it to stay still. Doesn't happen. So when we are looking at paintings of the kind that we are going to do now, when we are looking at any work of art of the past with which we have had no direct contact in the earlier and so on and so forth, we must be aware that there are inadequacies on our part, that we cannot penetrate beyond a certain limit. So with that reservation, and with that in our minds, we begin to look at works. The second thing I wish to draw your attention to, not yours only, but mine, I remind myself, is that in the Indian mind, and this is not very often spoken of, there is a longing for abstraction. We want to leave the world that is visible, that is approachable, close to us, and move into a slightly different world. Abstraction attracts us beyond measure. We may not realize it directly. We may not necessarily be aware of the fact that abstraction is something which is a part of the Indian psyche, so to speak. But we shall see a few things in a moment from now where this will come across. We are all aware of the fact that we are a part of a journey. That, I suppose, is a universal truth. But with intensity and with a degree of engagement, I think the Indian mind is constantly aware of the fact that we are a part of a journey. Millions of people in India wake up in the morning, get off the cot, but before they get off their simple cots and so on, put their feet on the ground. They utter a shloka. Vishnu Patni Namastubhyam Badakshepam Kshamasvame. Asking Mother Earth, the great goddess, who's the wife of Vishnu, to forgive me for doing the disrespect of putting my feet upon you. This natural tendency to see that you are going to now become a part of a journey when you put your feet on the ground and move and so on and so forth is something can be regarded, I see it as deeply moving. So what am I talking about? Basically, that we have to prepare ourselves to receive things which we have neither seen nor even imagined when we look at works of art. This particular series to which I wish to draw your attention has a history to it, and you'll forgive me if I take 2 or 3 minutes going back into it. These paintings, there are only 33 of them in number. More of them must be around the corner, lurking somewhere and so on, probably will come out of the woodworks in the course of time, now that this book has been published and now that they have been identified. But at this moment of time, as I stand here to speak to you, there are only 33 paintings, so it is a small series. And not only though there are only 33, but there are 2 series of the same theme. So in one particular series, there may be not more than 18 or 20, and the second series, which follows closely upon it, there may be 12 or 13 or 14. So it's a relatively small body of work that you and I are looking at. When these paintings appeared for the first time, the year was 1969. In 1969, Stella Kramrisch, great art historian, she published a single painting, a small, obscure little place where she had exhibited it. And she saw that there were 5 people who were walking through icy terrain. Who are these 5 people? We don't know. She didn't know. And she made a rough guess, and because they were bearded and they looked very grave and so on and so forth. 5 sages, she said, these are. Fair enough. A few years later, art historian Pratapaditya Paul, who had seen 2 paintings of the same series in the collection of Paul Walter in New York, he wanted to write on them, among other things and so on. And seeing these 5 sages or people walking through the icy peaks and so on, he said these are 5 Pandavas. Whenever you hear the number 5, immediately 5 senses, 5 Pandavas and so on so come to your mind. It's a fair guess. Except, and he said that the Pandavas who towards the end of their lives, when the Mahabharata is now gone, finished, they are ascending, they are taking the road to the heavens through the highest possible mountains. But Pandavas were not the only 5. With that group, there was Draupadi. In that group, there was also a dog, Dharmaraj in disguise, who was walking and so on. So, logically, it did not fit and so on, but everyone was content with the fact we at least have some way to describe who these 5 people are. We'll see them again and again and again, these paintings, and I'm taking my time to talk about how difficult it was and how problematic, really speaking, it was for art historians to identify what on earth is happening in these paintings. William Archer, He published a couple of paintings which were in the Victoria and Albert Museum, and he identified them as Indra's rishis. I mean, where he got that from, I have no idea at all. Stella Kramrich returned to the theme when more paintings were added to the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And this time she said, I have had a consultation with Shivaram Murthy, the great art historian, the great scholar, director of the National Museum. And the Shivaram Murthy said to me that it could be possibly the Parijata Haran series, episode from the Bhagavad Purana, where Krishna goes into get back the Parijat tree down to the earth and so on. So there are options. There were, I'm not saying are, there were options, whether they are Pandavas, Indra's rishis, or whether they are from the Bhagavad Purana, or whether they are who they are, 5 sages. Robert Skelton said, it is possibly 5 sages who are preparing themselves to meet Rama on his return from Lanka. So we have 5 possibilities of identifying what these 5 people are. It may matter to nobody at all as to who these are, but to me, it does matter. To me as an art historian, accuracy is, as far as we can reach it, is important. It so happened that I was in Zurich, along with my wife, Karuna. We had friends with Eberhard Fischer, who was then the director of the museum, sitting in his office, chatting about this and that. And a mail came in, which came from Geneva, not really Geneva, but next to Geneva, there's a little suburb called Cologne. And there is a great library there called the Boat Mariana. And somebody from there had sent a couple of photographs asking Eberhard whether he could identify what kind of a text these could come from. And in that batch, a small batch, there was a photograph, an image of a great big tree inside which women are seated playing music, and some fly whisks are hanging from, bells are there, musical instruments inside the tree. Puzzling thing. What could it be? And when Eberhard shared it with me and with Karuna, I said, I don't know what it is, but I think I have seen a Pahari painting of the same theme, roughly the same theme. So it is interesting that this is a Rajasthani leaf from Jaipur, stylistically established, and Pahari painting of the same theme. So now this was in Geneva, which is not very far from Zurich. Karuna, my wife, she said, I'll go to Geneva. Now she is braver than I am, was, and made up her mind. And Eberhard said, you go and see the manuscript from which this come. And Karuna went there and located the manuscript. It is not difficult because they were very well organized. And opened it was a bound volume with full of text and images, and she opened the first folio, and there were the opening words, At Kedara Kalpa Likhyate. Shri Ganeshaya Namah, At Kedara Kalpa Likhyate. Now begins the Kedara Kalpa. For the first time, there is some identity was possible, some identification. Kedara Kalpa. What the Kedara Kalpa is, she didn't know, I don't know. I didn't know at that particular time. Eberhard did not know. The people who owned that particular manuscript did not know. But at least we had a name, and then we went into this and so on. And Karuna and I decided that we should publish this. Not the whole manuscript, but the fact that this is a Kedara Kalpa text. Karuna is no more. And after she was gone, I decided that it is time that we complete a task. which we had begun. And I can tell you, you'll forgive me for a personal note here, as I was working on this in the last 2 years or something like this, one couplet kept ringing in my head. किसी का अक्स मेरे चश्मे तर में रहता है, किसी का अक्स मेरी चश्मे तर में रहता है, ये कैसा शख्स है पानी के घर में रहता है. My eyes were moist most of the time that I was working. Forgive me for a personal detail, because I was remembering Karuna and her scholarship and her being every time that I was begin to work on this particular series. The couplet means somebody's reflection, somebody's face, somebody's portrait stays constantly in my moist eyes. What kind of person is this who has made a watery home? The water is her home. किसी का अक्स मेरी चश्मे तर में रहता है. But enough of that. The book is done, published it, and when we just published a little detail that these are 5 pilgrims, sadhakas, not sages, not rishis, not munis, not divine beings and so on, sadhakas, who are on their way to the abode of Shiva, Kailash. I'm keeping you occupied with some details which are necessary, but I'll try and shorten them as much as I can, because I'm sure you are here to look at images rather than to hear my poor words. I read the Kedara Kalpa. It's a small text. It is not one of the Mahapuranas. There are 18 Puranas. It is not one of them. The Skanda Purana or the Shiv Purana are the 2 major sort of Shaivite texts. It is not a part of that. Kedara Kalpa was written, whoever wrote it, at a particular point of time in honor of the pilgrimage site of Kedarnath, which is one of the great sites which millions of people sort of visit and so on, are used to visit. Up in the mountains, about 6,000 meters high and very difficult to approach. So in order to raise the expectation of the pilgrims, establish that the Kedarnath is not an ordinary place of pilgrimage, a text was written called Kedara Kalpa, which glorified, which really rendered homage to this particular place. What we can call it is a Sthala Purana. It is a Puran, it is a local kind of a Puran related to a particular locus, raising the importance or celebrating the importance of this. And the Kedara Kalpa tells a story, starts off as a story, and I'll be very brief on that. There is a Pandit's family in a village, and they have a son who from his childhood is devoted to Shiva. Without informing his parents, he gets up one night and starts off on a journey. On the journey, he doesn't go very far. Some god or somebody who looks after the safety of people and so on stops him, challenges him, and so there is a conflict, there is a tussle and so on, and that god kills the young boy. And not wanting to be discovered, he throws his body into a ditch, and parents naturally next morning are very worried about where our son has gone, and they set up a search team, go and look for our son. And 5 people say, we will do that. And they move off and ask here, there, and so on, where this. And they go a little distance when they hear a kind of a ghostly voice, which says, you are looking for me? So it is the young man who had been killed. His voice is heard. Do not look for me any further. I have already reached the abode of Shiva. The mere fact that I made up my mind to go to Kailash has redeemed me. I have attained the abode of Shiva, Nirvana. And these people say, if the intention to go to Kailash is enough for you to earn this much of merit and so on, why do we not go ourselves? So these 5 people, not the Pandavas, not Rishis, not Munis, not people who are there to welcome Rama, and so these are the 5 sadhakas, that is the word used, seekers. Not those who have attained anything, seekers. They move off and so on. It is their journey that is recorded in these paintings. Strange things happen on the way. I mean, they come upon golden cities and so on, the rulers are there and so on. They say, they welcome these 5, come and rest here and so on. So where are you off to? They say, we are going to Kailash. He said, no, you don't have to go to Kailash. Whatever you need, all comforts of the world we'll place at your disposal. They will give you 500 slaves, so many women to look after you, so many horses and elephants and so on. Temptations are thrown in their direction. And they say, no. Our minds are made up, we are on our way to Kailash. The next step, another city, another golden city appears, and once again the same temptation or similar temptations are placed in their way, and they say, no, we are not interested in this, we are on our way to Kailash. Single-mindedly. So that is the substance of the tale, story, legend, myth, whatever you might like to call it, behind these paintings. I'll lead you through them, in fact. But before that, just a little bit before that, we can't understand everything or what is happening in painting, especially when it comes to abstractions. Now, what do I make of these 5 linga-like figures, or shapes, not figures, shapes, different colors? It's probably from a Jain manuscript, probably has nothing to do with Shiva, but attractive, remarkably attractive. The shapes, the designs inside of them, the subtle change of colors, pigment from one to the other and so on. It holds my attention. It really does. But I can't make any sense of this. So I'm prepared to accept the fact that this is beyond my reach. When I see a painting like this, again, I'm puzzled. Again, I realize the limits of my understanding. What are we watching? There is a Pandit or a devotee at the extreme right and 4 ovoid shapes inside which all kinds of strange things are happening. Vishnu appears, Varaha appears, the river Ganga is there, but it's not the course of the river Ganga. Whatever it is, somebody must have had a thought in his mind, his or her mind, and decided that I'm going to draw like this. Again, irresistible. Again, incomprehensible. Again, mysterious. Part of the mysterium magnum of which you and I are parts. So one has to recognize that there are limits to our understanding. But this is where I'm going to take you, Kedarnath. This is not a part of the series of paintings I'm going to talk about. This is a painting, an odd, stray painting in our museum in Chandigarh. And I think this comes closest to a rendering of the Kedarnath temple. It is a remarkable painting in many ways. Just look at this detail. This is the top part of the shikhar of the temple, and behind it there are these icy peaks, which are rising everywhere like the hoods of a great cosmic serpent. Shesha, Vasuki, names like this come to our minds. And especially because it's a Shaiv temple, the recollection to our minds, the jogging of our memories and so on and so forth, is of the association with serpents. But they are not serpents. In any case, it's a superbly painted leaf, not observed, but envisioned. We look at this now, the lower part of the painting, and we see pilgrims sort of running around or walking and so on, performing this ritual, that ritual and so on, and that little portico which leads to the Garbhagriha. There's a Nandi bull there. So it is obviously a Shaiv shrine. There are, Indian painting, you can turn it around. You only don't turn your head, but you can turn the painting around. And these structures which are at the left, which look at a very strange angle and so on, will fall into place. So there are other things that are happening here. Performances, there is a kund around or by the side of which some ritual is being performed. There is a Gauri Kund close to the Kedarnath temple and so on. Possibly it is that. And the river Sarava splits and this becomes a little island in which this is it. And that is the Mandakini river. Quite possibly. I can't be sure. So this painting, if it is a painting of the Kedarnath shrine, is not a part of this particular series, but this painting is. Now, you and I have to acquaint ourselves, or in fact, acclimatize ourselves to seeing the way the painters painted, how their minds worked. One of the things, given, one doesn't have to. One of the things that we have to be sure of, and it doesn't surprise us, that in the same frame, same space, the same figure, or in this case, group of figures, appears not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, sometimes 5 or 6 times. So it is a continuous pictorial narration, as we call it, in art historical terms, and time in a certain sense has been vacuumed out of this particular page, or these pages. So these 5 pilgrims, we will see them change, their appearances change. Nothing is exactly as we anticipated. They will grow beards, the beards will disappear in the next painting, they will wear fur hats, they will not wear fur hats in the next one, and so on. They will appear young, and they will appear old and nearly decrepit, and so on. But this brilliantly lit painting, the pilgrims arrive at a point, at the bottom right, as you can see, 5 of them. The number never changes. In the middle, center part, you see 3 figures walking in front of, with malas in their hands, in front of what looks like a rock which is meant to be a cave. So where are the remaining 2? Behind that. You can see them, only the heads visible. So 5. Then the text says that these pilgrims moved on, sadhakas, and there was a rock which was like the shape of a moon. The painter doesn't want to do the repeat of the same stone, so he actually brings a half moon over there, and one of them is actually put his leg across it and going to the other side and so on, the 5 towards the top right. And then, since they are on the move, we see them again towards the top left, 5 of them in a row walking slowly in another direction. So they never abandon their path. It's a riveting picture. If you look at the river down below, and emerging from the river or submerged in the river, there are these very dark, grey, almost frightening kind of forms. If you're not frightening, jutting their heads out of water to see what is around. Walruses, as it were. So these strange happenings, these strange sights, come our way all the time. These 5 pilgrims, these sadhakas, arrive at a sylvan spot. Every time that they are there, they are looking for the phallic emblem of Shiva, the Shivalinga, and here they sat by the side of the rivulet. You don't even see them unless you get very close to the painting. They're almost merging with the stones on which they are seated, but they're drinking sacred water from the stream. And then after having done that, they go into that little grove where a Shivaling is, bathe the Shivaling with water and so on, do pranam, while in the background, the icy peaks are glowering over them. Beautifully done lotuses and so on, but the liberty taken by the painter with appearances is extraordinary. This is the folio which came to my mind when that Rajasthani leaf arrived in Zurich from the library in Geneva. If you notice, in the right half of the painting towards the very top, there is a great big tree. And inside the tree are seated women, apsaras, wings there, fly whisks are hanging from them, and musical instruments are scattered inside the tree. And down below, around the tree, some women are singing. The idea is that these are areas which we know nothing about, constant celebration, joyousness, etc. And the celebration of Shiva is what is taking place at every golden city that these people come. The sadhakas, the 5 of them, you see them coming from the top right, enter the gate, enter the city, and then they are surrounded by beautiful women, and then they go again towards the left, and then move into the kingdom, so to speak, which is presided over by a sage-like figure. This theme, you can see it from a little closer. The drawing is not extraordinary. The drawing is rather limited in its skills. But the coloring is dominant. And this is what had stuck in my mind, that somewhere I had seen this tree with strange things happening inside it. And this is a Rajasthani painting in that manuscript, bound volume in Geneva. This tree is not as populated as the Pahari tree was, but the 5 sadhakas towards the left, all of them ashen grey, and there are women who, of course, are dancing around and so on, or playing on, swinging on swings and so on and so forth, like that. So there is a connection, obviously. The same text is the inspiration behind the Rajasthani book and the leaves from a Pahari series. At one point of time, Shiva assumes the garb because he is constantly seeing what these sadhakas are doing. So he assumes the form of an old man. And if you see towards the right, there are these 5 standing, and an old man is approaching them with a staff in hand. That is Shiva in disguise. Asks them a question, where are you off to? Where are you headed? And they answer, we are going to the abode of Shiva in the Kailash. And then next step, they see Shiva himself on the great Nandi bull. Himself and Sadashiva, more than one head, with his consort, Parvati by his side, on that Nandi. And all around, as you can see, there's just a patch of green, which is a quiet area, so to speak. Elsewhere, these peaks and so on raise their heads towards the skies. Similar theme, darshan of Shiva, unexpectedly. And Shiva will disappear because he wants them to continue on their journey. Rajasthani work. This is where the 5, now they have beards, now they look like hoary old men and so on. They sit inside a cave, make up their minds, we are going on this journey, this sacred journey, and then we see them moving away. The painter makes the effort to distinguish one from the other. Nobody has a name. They are just sadhakas. But the painter distinguishes them. One of them is wearing a deer skin, another one has a leopard skin around his shoulders, one of them has a black beard, the other one has a graying beard, and so on and so forth. The little differences. So that it is not one person seen 5 times, but 5 different individuals. This is how the whole thing begins. It is a story told by Shiva himself to his son Kartikeya. Shiva is seated there. This is the Kailash. Nandi bull by his side, Parvati by his side on a tiger skin. And the narrative is being heard by Kartikeya. Same theme in a second series from the same area, which is the lesser series, is like this. Without any doubt, the 2 series are related. But this is a relatively poorer series in terms of draftsmanship. All the same, it has its own merits, its own attractions. We'll see that as we go. They come to another spot, perform obeisance before the linga, sit in front of a fire which they have lit in order to keep themselves moderately warm. Then they move off, and when they get onto a peak, they suddenly see a great big terrestrial kind of a globe, golden, shining, iridescent, and are wonderstruck. What is there in the midst of these mountains? And then they see, look down, that there are 7 golden cities. It's all myth, all imagination. Come to a point, icy cold water, but they take their bath because before they have darshan, they have to do that. In fact, one of them says, I must have my head shaved, because when you go with a resolve, with a manorath in mind, then a barber is called in comes from somewhere. Towards the extreme right, you will see a barber shaving the head of one of the sadhakas. Then they bend before the shivling, and then they bathe again afterwards, and towards the top left, they are moving again. But interestingly, and something which you don't even notice to begin with, behind the temple, there is a herd of sheep, and there is a dog who keeps track of the sheep, a gaddi dog. The gaddis are inhabitants of very high mountains in the Himachal area, and so the gaddis are distinguished by the costumes they wear, very rough cloaks and so on, and a conical kind of a cap, and one of them is playing a flute just behind the temple, and towards the very top, in the middle, the gaddis are back, walking their own distant, in their own sort of direction, with the wife of the gaddi, who has carrying a kilta on the back of her, on her back, in which some fruit or things like this are kept. You can rest your eyes for long stretches of time on images like this, taking in details, whether this rock or that rock, the shape of this or that, or whether how to vary the stances of the various seekers and so on and so forth, like that. Same theme in a lesser format, a lesser, smaller series, exactly the same thing happening. This we have seen before. And this, in the smaller series, relatively smaller, there the moon rock has been given a different kind of a shape here by this particular painter. They enter opulent palaces, and everywhere they are welcomed. But then At the end of the welcome, 1 or 2 days and so on, the ruler of that particular city asks them, why are you troubling yourself? You are seeking something, we'll give it to you here. And there's so many women, so many elephants, so many horses, so much money, so many jewels and so on. And they say, no, nothing, we are on our way. That pattern in the right half of the painting, where these five are surrounded by admiring women. A kind of a concentric circle of flowers blooming. And they say, we're not going to sleep inside these palaces, we just want to lie down on the ground outside. And coming out of the city or the town, they lie down there, 4 or 5 of them and so on. And suddenly they dream that Shiva's appeared. And there he is. That's a dream. These seekers, this is from the smaller series, they all wear fur caps. So if you see a painting with a fur cap, a man wearing a fur cap, you can be sure it is from the smaller series. Come to a point where outside a great big sort of a palace which is built on top of a jeweled mountain and so on, a man is hanging upside down. And the 5 of them stop and ask him questions about what are you doing? He says, I'm doing penance because by error at some point of time, I said something which was blasphemous and I'm paying for it. So many hundreds of years will pass, so many people will cross this path and then I will be redeemed or something like that. Strange things happening, really beyond belief, because in those climbs, when you get to a particular height, you hallucinate also. This temple, beautifully decorated, and the 5 of them seated in front of the temple. But these are details from one particular painting. There's a tree towards the right of the fruit of which they eat and they become unconscious alike. But it's an extraordinary drawing of these 5 people lying on that particular platform, unconscious. They've just had a bath, they have eaten that fruit, and they are there. They suddenly become younger, more attractive. But details like this are scattered all over the paintings. These shapes, these colors, and these compositions sometimes, it's as if one is really dreaming about these things. Talking about abstraction, I did it in the beginning and so on, like that. These details, not very well drawn but well observed. And this barber, who's come from a village nearby and so on, has his instruments very closely painted, very neatly painted in a cloth sort of bag by his side. This Gaddi, the man who lives somewhere about 12,000 feet high and so on and so forth, playing upon his instrument. Details one has to focus upon. You close your eyes and they will flash in an unguarded moment upon your mind. So this journey, this sacred journey on which they are, This is the work, my guess is no signature. But stylistic basis, I think this is the work of a painter from the family of the Purkhu of Kangra up in the Himalayas. This is not a part of the same series, but you recognize this is Purkhu's picture, and you can recognize the rocks and the figures of Shiva and Parvati. This is the opening leaf. Om Shri Ganeshaya Nama At Kedara Kalpa Likhyate. Shri Guruve Nama. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Deva Maheshwara, and so on. Beautifully, this is from the Geneva manuscript. So we can go on looking at this, but before you grow old and I grow even older, I thought I'll get some friend of mine to draw these 5 and so on against a dark background, walking in a direction to a destination all desire but few reach. I repeat Mir Taki Mir's couplet here. ले सांस भी आहिस्ता के नाजुक है बहुत काम आफाक की इस कारगहे शीशागरी का. May I thank all of you here for the favor you've done me by being here. Thank the Bangalore International Center. Thank MAP and its wonderful team and these young ladies who have been interpreting. Thank you very much.